Hello, everyone. Our spiritual journeys can take us to some pretty weird and wonderful places. And there's not much that surprises me nowadays, but I was pretty surprised this morning when I was having conversation with my spirit guides, and I was interrupted by some Gorgons. Now, all I knew about Gorgons was from Greek mythology, right? Monstrous, scary creatures, Medusa punished by Athena, this sort of thing. So, was a little bit concerned and slightly bemused as to why we would be getting Gorgons in for a conversation. But what they had to say about the witch wound was incredibly interesting. So let me start with how this came about. For the last few days, I've been having Etruscans, the Etruscan culture, come up a lot as signs for me um, in my feed, in my consciousness, in my dreams. Now, the Etruscan culture is an Italian, ancient Italian culture that predates the Romans. It was a contemporary civilization of the ancient Greeks. But the difference between Greek culture and Etruscan culture was that Etruscan culture was at the very least equal between men and women, whereas the Greeks weren't letting their wives leave the house during the day. Um, and the Etruscans might have been a matriarchal society. Now, the Romans stole most of their good ideas from the Etruscans, their style of dress, their architecture, their engineering brilliance, all the things we associate with Romans, aqueducts, drainage, underfloor heatings, paved roads, amazing sculptures and arts. It all came from the Etruscans. The only thing that the Romans dumped that the Etruscans had was the equal validity of women in society, if not matriarchal society. Now, despite them being contemporaries of the Greeks were completely the opposite. Wives were pretty much confined to the house, women were for breeding, boys were for pleasure. Very, very different. Even though they interacted with each other and they traded with each other, their ways of running their societies were very different. In one way, we could say matriarchal and patriarchal. In a way, we could say that the ancient Greeks were really one of the original patriarchal societies, and this could be where it emerged from into our way of living. It echoes through the ages, if you like. Now, the Etruscans lived in city-states and did not have an army. They were peaceful, creative people. And so when the Roman culture had evolved to a state where they could extend beyond Rome itself, their city-state, they were very slowly, over a period of decades, absorbed by the Roman Empire because the Romans, well, before it became an empire, this was the start of their empire, the Romans had, again, a very patriarchal fighting force and that they were able to overcome the Etruscan city-states one by one. And that culture of equal importance for women, celebrating women, and potentially a matriarchal society was overcome, and they were absorbed into the wider Roman Empire. And that's really how the Roman Empire began, really, was the taking over of the Etruscan city-states. Now, what the Gorgons had to tell me was very interesting. They told me that Etruscan culture, especially that matriarchal culture, was a satellite state and an echo of Atlantean culture. And that actually the reason that they were so developed is that they were not survivors as such of Atlantis in the sense that they had escaped and established another colony like we might see in the Iberian Peninsula and potentially in Ireland as well. But also that it was a satellite city state before the fall. So they weren't refugees, they were already there. And they essentially just stayed and became their own civilization. And so we don't understand the Etruscan language. We've lost many, many or most of their written evidence. So we don't know their stories. And we there are some parts of parchment of theirs that were found bizarrely wrapped around Egyptian mummies, which again is another Atlantean link. Was Kem a sister satellite civilization from Atlantis? Is very likely, and survivors went there because they knew they spoke the language. So we've got very few written evidence for Etruscan stories and things. So that matriarchal law, that matriarchal tradition is lost because the language and the stories are lost. So when I asked these Gorgons why this had been coming up for me, they said because history is written by the victors. I'll tell you exactly what they said. They said history is written by the victors, and in this case, the patriarchy. So they're talking about their legend and their very being, their existence being older than all these civilizations. They called themselves the first people. And the Gorgons refer to themselves as the first people. And they essentially described being erased, or their importance and their feminine power being erased by the patriarchy, by whereas it was celebrated with the Etruscans and again the Cretan civilizations, the Minoans, people like that, the Phoenicians. It was killed off, if you like, by the Romans and the ancient Greeks. Now, the ancient Greeks also learned an important lesson from the erasure of the Etruscans. And it was if you didn't have a marshaled army or city-states, you were going to be overrun. And that completely informed how they dealt with the Persian invasion, and the rest is history. We've got the story of 300 and of Marathon and all that sort of stuff. So they wanted to take some stuff from the Etruscan Empire, but not the matriarchal way of running a civilization. So the Gorgons were effectively saying that their legend had been warped and deliberately changed and wiped out to make them into monsters. Now, they said that they were Nephilim. Now, obviously, this set alarm bells ringing with me because, again, the only stories we're given about Nephilim is that they're these terrible monsters who were human angel hybrids, and, God sent the flood to wipe them out. So, what the Gorgons were saying was that the Nephilim were the first people, which correlates with what we're told by our history. But they also, and she did say that they were hybrids. She did say that they were giants, but she said that they were only monsters to those who cannot tolerate difference. So already we're seeing a race demonized by those who wish to control the narrative. And the Gorgons are asking us to question what we're told. Now, they describe the Nephilim as being like any other civilization, any other race. There are good ones and bad ones. There are power-hungry ones and ones that want to help. They're like humans. They're like, despite being giants and hybrids, and they're just like humans, you know. There's lots of different types of people with lots of different types of personalities and ways they live their life. And in that case, in that sense, she said that the Nephilim were no different to us, and in some ways less destructive. Um, she she also Medusa was speaking first, and then her sisters came in. So they also asked us to consider what snakes have been used to represent for us. So when I asked the Gorgons if they had snakes for hair, she said no. No, we didn't have snakes for hair. We looked like humans, but we had wings. So they were winged women. Now, if you think about what we're told about snakes in our culture, we're told about snakes in the Bible, about how, you know, it represents forbidden knowledge, the devil, you know, the betrayal of Eve, the casting out. We've been led to believe that snakes are represent evil. But the Gorgons are saying, actually, if you look in other cultures, if you look at the Naga, if you look at Indian culture, if you look at, oh, and they specifically referenced the goddess Inanna, the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna, who's often shown with a coil of snakes, a coiled snake on her head. They reference their Ishtar, who was the next step on from Inanna, as she was a Babylonian goddess, but she's commonly believed to be Inanna. They're both shown with coiled snakes on their heads and wings. And the Gorgons were saying to me that Inanna and Ishtar are Gorgons, that we are the keeper of wisdom, the winged ones, the keeper of wisdom. And that we've been brought up to believe that they're monsters when they're not. And if you think about Indian culture and also Babylonian, Mesopotamian culture, all the cultures that you know, Western culture leads you and Western religions lead you to believe are evil and satanic. And I don't know why I said evil that way. And satanic and things like that. Actually, snakes in those cultures represent knowledge. And to the Greeks, they represent knowledge, and it's where we get our symbol of science and medicine from, with the winged staff and the coiled snakes. And even in Kundalini, you know, the energy that becomes a conduit for the divine and a symbol of awakening is represented by a snake. So what the Gorgons were saying was that they were associated with wisdom and knowledge, and that they were winged beings, just like sometimes, you know, just like Nephilim, and that they were nice, they were good, and they were just like humans in the sense of all the faults that we have, good and bad, all the seven deadly sins, you know, pride, boastfulness, gluttony, but also all the nice things that human had, just like any other race. And what she said had happened to her, she described it as Icarus energy, that she got too big for her boots, that she was boastful and prideful, and she disrespected Athena by saying that she was more beautiful and having an intimate episode in the temple of Athena, and she was punished for that. Um, and so were her sisters. And while we're on the subject of Gorgon's sisters, the Gorgons were said to be three sisters, but they also had another three sisters, and they were the Grayery, the Grey sisters, and they're the ones that are famous in Greek mythology for having one eye that they shared and passed around. So they have the sight; they can see anything, anyone, anywhere. You know, we're all familiar with that nowadays with clairvoyance. They were seers, but in Western culture, women who are seers have been demonized. You know, the three sisters, the Grayery sisters, the Grey sisters from Greek culture, who are the Gorgon sisters, have literally been demonized in the play Macbeth. You know, the weird sisters, they're very much representative of the Grey sisters, the Gorgon sisters. And you know, this is representative of the witch wound. And the Gorgons said to me that their story of being demonized by the patriarchy, of being demonized by the Greeks, um, after the Etruscan culture was wiped out, of being made into monsters, which they were not, she said. They were effectively presenting like angels. They were winged women. Um, this harsh punishment, this not being believed, you know, the sisters of Medusa begged for forgiveness for her slight against Athena. They tried to help her. And they were punished too. They were all apparently turned into monsters as well. Um, so this not being listened to, this being invalidated, this not being believed, um, this demonization of female wisdom represented by the snakes and female sight, six senses represented by the Grey sisters, the Gorgons' other sisters, is the very origin of the witch wound. Um, and this is what they were saying to me today, that actually our, they called it ancestral soul karma and trauma that all women carry today of being seen, of fearing their own gifts, of fearing their own voice, all comes from the experience of the Gorgons. Because according to the Gorgons, who I spoke to today, they have living descendants. Um, Soul descendants, soul family descendants. The Gorgons told me that their souls had reincarnated on this life, on the Earth plane since they had lived as Gorgons, and that they have living soul family descendants, and that we all must learn from and heal their wounds and heal our own fear of ourselves, because they said it's been completely distorted by the patriarchy, effectively. Um, and they were talking about how initially um, they were almost like the Minoan goddesses who held snakes, or I think Alexander the Great's mother, Olympia, slept with snakes in her bed and things. She was some sort of priestess as well. I don't know much about her, but there was this sort of consorting with snakes, that was a sense of displaying your knowledge, displaying your higher knowing, and also your courage and your strength. Um, and that's been taken and turned them into monsters. And she wants us to know, Medusa wanted us to know, that that is not at all what they were, and that we need to question everything that we were ever told by the patriarchy, because it serves them well, she said. It serves them well to keep you down, which never a truer word was spoken, was it? And she said that actually, initially, they were they were linked not to snakes at all, but to cuttlefish and octopuses, which were known for their speed and their intelligence. And so, and in fact, the legend of the Gorgon sisters nowadays does still reference their speed, um, but it's all been warped um, in order to make us fear them, when actually the Gorgons are actually really rather nice. We had a lovely chat this morning. They're not anything to be scared about at all. Um, they want to help us clear that karma. And it's interesting timing as well, because the asteroid Medusa is quite present in our skies at the moment. Be interesting to see where exactly she is. But the Gorgons are coming in to try and shake it up a bit. In fact, she said, let me have a look in my notebook. She said that their time returns, our time returns. And she wasn't talking about the Nephilim. She was talking about matriarchal societies, and the benefits of living in at least equal, if not fully matriarchal societies. Um, and they also have a close link with Hecate. Now, again, Hecate is another one whose whole persona has been demonized by modern culture. Much like the Morrigan as well, another, triple goddess. There's three Gorgons, there's three Grey sisters, there's three. Hecate is a three-faced goddess. The Morrigan is three sisters as well. And we've been taught to fear these people, to believe they're not real, to believe they are dark, and they're not at all. Actually, when you meet them and you speak to them, they are, well, they're quite matriarchal. They're quite maternal. Um, the Morrigan said herself that she's the goddess of warning, not of war. She's trying to give you advance warning. She's trying to help you. Hecate effectively will protect you, much as the Gorgons were symbols of protection. They used to, people used to put Gorgon heads on their doors, or whole Gorgons guarded temple entrances, usually to temples of Artemis. So Artemis, who has been revered, and Gorgons, who have been demonized, were actually once intrinsically linked, protecting one another and working together. And we should really question why we believe the things we do and why we might have been misled. Um, and Hecate's been coming up a lot for me recently as well. And she's one, again, she's another one who's asteroid. I know she's an asteroid or a fixed star. I think it's an asteroid, who is very present in the sky at the moment as well. And I often find when these asteroids are nearer to our solar system and in important conjunctions, that it almost thins the veil for those beings. Hecate is not somebody who comes to me very often, but she's been coming in a lot, and she's been talking about Gorgons. So I think she was kind of softening me up so I didn't get scared. Not that I would get scared, but I guess some people would be a little bit surprised when that showed up. Although that is not how the Gorgons presented. They presented as beautiful Grecian looking or Etruscan looking women, um, you know, sisters. And one who was mortal, Medusa, who was a little bit prideful and, got herself in trouble for it. And nothing more than that. But they were extremely well educated in the mysteries, or what we call mysteries now, but actually in matriarchal societies were common knowledge. Um, and so I wanted to do a quick card reading about what the Gorgons would like us to know beyond what they've already told us. And an interesting aside from that, I just moved my notebook. An interesting aside from that, you may or may not know that Medusa is the mother of Pegasus, and also a golden giant who was still smaller than her, a golden giant who had a golden sword and wings. So neither of which were very scary. But people revere Pegasus as being this great mythological creature, but they don't give his mother credit. They demonize the woman, they demonize the mother, but the child's okay because they're both male. And we need to have a think about that. How could something evil, if she really was, produce something so beautiful? It's unlikely, isn't it? It's unlikely. So just question what you've been told about female figures throughout history and female goddesses, because not only were they real beings, are they real beings? They existed, but also they want us to be aware that we have been deliberately misled about who they are to keep us down. Um, when I asked her how you could tell good Nephilim from bad, I asked Medusa that. She said that just on feeling, you can feel which ones are good and which ones are bad if you ever, run into any of them. Um, just your instinct will tell you, which is very true. She's saying, trust yourself, trust your feminine instinct. Right. What do the Gorgons want us to know, want to teach us beyond what they've already said? Is there something? There's this choice point coming up again. This split, these two paths that keep coming up. Protection. So we've got the Two of Wands. All females so far coming out in these cards. All women. All women. That's the Page of Wands and the Ace of Cups together. And this is very interesting. I'm just going to move you aside so I can make a bit more room for the cards. It's very interesting what's coming out. So your choice now, you have a choice what to believe now. And that's going to inform the path you take. And they're talking about a very interesting, an emancipation of men and a chance to plant a seed and work together. They're talking. See, this is why Etruscan's coming up for me so much. Again, the underlying energy, can you see that, is all working together. The Three of Pentacles. Working together to create something. And again, underneath that is celebration. But this always reminds me of like, see, the underlying cards are so interesting. They are all women, the three women working together. This create a new society. This is the underlying energy. And we've got the moon, the lunar energy. The moon, another energy that has been demonized. The night is dark. No, the night is creation, the void is creation, and the moon is female power, female energy, female synchronicity, the tame dog and the wolf, the balance between the wild and the civilized is the woman's knowing. And justice, justice for the Gorgons. Isn't that interesting as the underlying energy? So, what came out in what they want us to know? And again, we've got this split energy. We've got the Two of Wands. Now, this is plans and strategy and preparation. But I'm getting very much that this is a choice. But it's an active choice. We've got the Eight of Wands underneath it. So we've got a plan and a strategy that I'm seeing in my mind's eye as two separate paths that we could take as a civilization, as a collective. But it's an active choice. It is something that you're going to be conscious of. It is not something that happens to you. It is something that we actively decide. The power is in our hands, literally in that card. She's holding the staffs. The yeah, staffs? Yeah. Um, and then we've got the Nine of Wands. Now, this could be protection. The Gorgons are linked to protection, protective goddesses. But also, I think the fact that Hecate has been coming in for us as well. I think the combination of the two is quite important. You've got two protective, um, two protective female forces, but that like to teach you to do it yourself. Now, we had this come up with Gwyn ap Nuith a few months ago in the sense that he said, you will be protected and you will be tested. And you may find that when you ask your guides, they say, do it yourself. And this is very Hecatean in the fact that, why give you a fish when she can teach you to fish, Um, and and there's a sense that what we're going through now is a learning in order to make an active choice that gives us the power we need to put our own boundaries in place and have our own voice listened to again, because there's this Gorgon, this not just Medusan, it is this Gorgon vibe of not being believed, not being listened to, having our voices invalidated. And there's a sense here that is, I want to say, taking our toys and going home, taking our ball and going home, don't want to play anymore. And I think to a certain extent that's already happening. If you look at modern dating culture and things, this sort of alt-right men are saying, why aren't interested in me? And it's because the boundaries are being put in place. We won't accept being treated badly or as second-class citizens, or our opinions being dismissed and invalidated, or not being listened to until, it can be microaggressions, like telling someone something, and instead of them believing you the first time, not believing or accepting you were correct until they've learnt the hard way. Is that sort of like microaggression that I want to say we need to actively stand against now and advocate for ourselves, and not in a kind of, the Gorgons were a bit like banshees. They were known for their screeching. One of them in particular, I think it was Aurelie, one of the sisters, was known for her shrieking voice. And again, the power of a woman's voice being demonized, just like the banshee, when banshee means being of light. And yet, what do we believe about them now? We don't want to hear their voice, be afraid of their voice. They're dark, they're evil. How could a being of light be that? And there's this, the power is in our hands. If we want to change it, we have to change it on a micro level, on our own individual interactions, stand our ground, advocate for ourselves, don't fear our own voice, um, and make an active decision to put yourself first is the wrong way of putting it. But see yourself as equally valid, not in an aggressive way, in a very calm way. I think that's almost a bit more scary, isn't it? When you're very steady, there's a lot more power in that than having lost control. And I think that's what the Gorgons are saying here. The power is in our voices when they're calm, but they're full of belief, of our own power. Um, and then we've got the Page of Wands. Again, they're all women, these cards. The Page of Wands, she's watching the sunrise. So a new beginning. And it came out right on top of the Ace of Cups. And you know how I said it was the energy of, if you don't treat us well, we're gonna take our ball and we're gonna go home. We don't want to play anymore. That feels like what she's got. She's got her precious, she's got a beautiful fish in here, a beautiful fish in a ball, in a cup, in the water of the emotions of the heart. And she's bringing it with her forward. The ace is the start. It's the start. It's the rise. And it's growing. The news that grows, that we're bringing our gifts and we're guarding them like a dragon guards its hoard. The dragon line, the dragon women, the dragon priestesses are on the move now, and we're bringing our emotional intelligence and our precious gifts. Again, it's a sunrise again. Two sunrises. There's a new beginning here, but we have to grab it with both hands. We have to choose to change it. And it doesn't mean that you have to, you know, go campaign. You don't need a placard. You could do that if you like, but you don't have to do that. You can change it in the micro interactions you have in your own home, with your own family, with the men you come into contact with, because there's the card that came out underneath these. I'll put it in front of my face so you can see, of the new beginning, was the fear. The fear. The fear of something bad happening to us, the fear of being demonized. That's exactly what they were saying is what happened to them. Look at them, you know? That was not how they were. They were the first people. They were, according to them, created by God. And yet here, look now, monsters. So don't be afraid of being made out to be a monster, because if you stay calm and strong and kind and emotionally intelligent, but have strong boundaries, all the things that is, nurturing the divine feminine, then that impacts other people. You know that when you're happy, it makes other people happy. When you laugh, other people start laughing. Even if you smile on the phone and someone can't see that you're smiling, it changes how they react to you and they start smiling too. That's the energy that the Gorgons are talking about. Live it. Embody how you want to take this energy forward and be interacted with, and is almost like it's catching, and don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of what might happen or the consequences or whatever. Don't put yourself in dangerous situations, but don't be afraid of being proud of yourself, of being, because one of Medusa's lessons is that she was prideful. She said she was more beautiful than Athena. But it's still important to be proud of who you are and what your positive attributes are. Your negative attributes you can always work on. You can choose not to do it. It's a choice, right? But kind of broadcast your good ones, and don't be ashamed of them. Hecate said something this morning to me. She said, humility is the pivot point between self-confidence and grandiosity. And she was talking about walking the line of not being afraid of who you are and not being afraid of your power, but being mindful not to become like Medusa, not become too big for your boots, and to self-police and reflect back on. And it's interesting because in many meditation practices, reflecting back on your day and how you've interacted with other people and how you could have done it better, not at the expense of yourself, but how you might have been more patient or kinder, or is a very important part of a spiritual practice. So it's interesting that Hecate and the Gorgons have brought that into the reading here. And the final cards are very, very nice because we've got the King of Cups. This is men learning emotional intelligence. And I love the fact that he's holding the cup of tea that she brings. He's holding it. He's got it. She's passed it on to him. And the dove of peace and freedom is flying to him. It's making peace and equilibrium. And obviously he's holding a magnolia as well, which is a spring blooming flower. He's on a boat, he's transitioning. This is a process which we can actively choose to promote within ourselves in our everyday lives that leads to this catching of respect. And what came out with that is the Hermit. Now, this very much is meditative. Um, But this is really giving me Merlin vibes. This is giving me, and Merlin always strikes me as a man who needed to learn his lessons. Yes, he played a really important role. Yes, he's an ascended master. Yes, but as a human, he had important lessons to learn. And one of his most important lessons to learn was about his interactions with women and his his attitude to whether he had power over their bodies, his his needing to learn to overcome his physical desires, with regards to projecting them onto other individuals like Nimue. And so this very much to me, these two cards coming out together is really nice because we've talked and talked and talked about women and how women were treated and how women were demonized and where the witch wound comes from, according to the Gorgons, and the demonization of women. And in every part of our Western culture, um, even down to, the fashion now for the physical disappearing of women by dieting yourself to oblivion. And so it's really nice at the end of this reading to have two cards come in that represent the learning and the wisdom and the emotional progression and awareness and awakening of men in response to our choices. And I'm not saying that how we choose to interact as women um, causes how we're responded to. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying an active choice to be powerful and strong and calm and embody your power rubs off. This is what the Gorgons are saying, that it has the potential to change the world. And the very last cards, it's your choice. You're weighing up the two, and they're watching. You know, there's very Eye of Ra energy here, isn't there? You know, and again, the sunflower in Basque tradition is protection. I was speaking to someone about this the other day. The equilore is a protection symbol and a very ancient protection symbol. And so you've got this protective energy, this Gorgon energy, watching, observing what we choose. What do we choose to take forward? Because they're both gifts. You've got two pentacles. There's two seeds to be planted here. Which one? Which one will you choose? Because this is an action. This is a positive action choice you must take forward. And oh, I dropped one. But the very last card is the Ace of Pentacles. She's chosen and she's looking down at all its potential. All its potential. And it's interesting there how you've got the sea in the background because the Gorgons and the Grey Sisters are the daughters of a sea god. And again, you know, a lot of things that have been coming up when we talk about our shadow have been representing to me in my dreams as merrows, which are much closer to what mermaids actually are like. You know, they're quite fierce. You wouldn't mess with them. Certainly don't go looking for them. But it's interesting here that the final card in the message from the Gorgons is one of potential, a seed to be planted, something to take forward. And there you've got, you know, the feminine in what we would associate with an almost angelic, pure form. And taking that forward. But there's very much this energy of the choice is ours. There's this crunch point coming up um, where we can choose to live in a different way or not. But it does involve an active choice and some, I want to say, passive pushing on our part. But not in an aggressive way, not even in an overly assertive way, but just in a choosing ourselves kind of way. I want to say, if you build it, they will come. And I think that we're being asked by the divine feminine. We're being asked by all those women who've been burned and demonized and lied about and disbelieved to take forward something different into our everyday lives and to be very proud of who we are and what we can do.